Hello everyone, I'm Karen. Today I'm going over my Beatles books. We've got quite a lot of Beatles books. We're going to do 2 different categories. We're going to do group books about the group, which I've got more of, and books from solo members as well. So this group one might be split into different parts. We'll see how it pans out. So we're going to start off with this one called The Beatles, and it says the Fab Four who dominated pop music for a decade. So yeah, this I think was one of my earliest Beatles books I got. It came out in the 80s, I think. This is an 80s print of it. Some nice photos in here and everything. So I did that one. See what else there is in here. That's a nice one there. It even talks about the Beatles' solo career, solo years too, and try to see if I can find a picture in here. That's a good one. That's a newspaper article on them in the Mersey Beat. So yeah, there's like a lot of good pictures in here, particularly with these Beatles books. A lot of nice photos that I've never seen before. This is one of my favourite ones. This is a bit upside down. This is the BBC Archives, 1960-1970 by Kevin Howlett. This book was published in 2013. Back's upside down a bit. Yeah, to take that off. It's about their radio and television appearances for the BBC in the 60s and 70s. Says that. We get this big book that has a nice picture of our tape reel at the front. Back, Beatles sessions in the BBC. Nice picture of them outside the BBC. The book's falling apart a bit, but I'll try and keep holding on to it the best I can. Nice picture. It talks about the Beatles' radio programs as well as their television appearances. Even the songs that the Beatles performed. And it talks about the radio. It has Radio Times covers that the Beatles appear on. So yeah, it talks about the recording and broadcast dates, what stations they went out on. So it's nice to have that. It also has these BBC documents in here from the Beatles archive. It's a nice picture of them. There's an application for audition, which was signed by Brian Epstein. This is all out in 4 pages. This is an audience research report on the Sure From Us To You, which is a back holiday special that the Beatles broadcast. This is something for their TV show It's the Beatles. Camera rehearsals and that. And the recording. And the running order. The research report on the film Magical Mystery Tour from 1967. Letter from John in 1968. It says, why have you cut the only bit of real communication out of my release interview? Love, John Lennon. Also, I've heard, dated 21st of June 1968. And this is a letter from May 1967 about the banning of A Day in the Life from the director of sound broadcasting to EMI. Because A Day in the Life was one of those ones that was Sgt. Pepper that was banned by the BBC as they believed it referenced drugs. I mean, it was the 60s and loads of people were doing drugs back then. So it's a great book to have. I recommend it. There's a lot of insight to their television radio appearances at the BBC. We have the Beatles illustrated lyrics by Alan Partridge. There's been many editions of this. It first came out as a 2-volume set in the 1969 and 1971, and it was then reissued in hardback in 1988. It came out in 1 volume in 1990. It was reprinted in 2001. So there's a lot of like, you basically get the lyrics and pictures of the Beatles and some like animations to like accompany the lyrics. Trying to find, just flipped to the page. So there's quite a lot of cool ones as well. Yeah, it's a very good one from Maxwell's Silver Hammer. As well as quotes from the songs. Let's quote about the songs. Nice one for the end there. So yeah, very interesting one. Beatles Yellow Submarine. I think this was, I'm not sure when this came out, so I think this is a 2011 reprint, or it was published in 2004. Doesn't say when this copy was published. I think it's 2011 or something like that. But I've done a bit of research on these books, I'm not really too sure. But this book is about the Beatles film Yellow Submarine. It's basically the film of Yellow Submarine in the book. It's the animated Beatles film, of course, and I saw Yellow Submarine at school one time, and I thought it was alright. I have Hard Day's Right by Steve Turner. This is basically, this came out in, it first came out in the 90s, and it's been re-released on many occasions. This is the 2012 version, and edition. Yeah, it's really, really good book. The front of it's a bit torn, so we're gonna do it from this one. From this, it basically talks about the story behind Beatles songs, inspirations as to why they wrote them, the inspirations to write them, as well as some pictures which are interesting. Ones of which I've never, some which I don't think I've seen many of these. That's them with the Yellow Submarine. That's a cool one. And there's the one for Dr. Robert, the inspiration behind Dr. Robert, the song Dr. Robert. And Better for Mr. Kite, a picture of John with that poster. So yeah, there's quite a lot of interesting facts of these songs. We have Beatles. This is by Igloo Books. I know Igloo Books have done a few books on the Beatles. So this has got some 5 pieces of memorabilia. It's got some pieces of memorabilia, and it's interesting to have. And some nice pictures. Talks about the Beatles members as well as the story of the Beatles. So yeah, so there's some interesting ones, as well as the memorabilia, which I will show. It's got 2 black and white postcards, an A4 colour poster, 2 A5 colour photographs. I really like that one. So that's that one. This was 2014, that one. So quite cool. Then we have Beatles, the Unseen Archives. This was one that came out. This is one that came out in 2000. There's like a lot of nice photographs in here. I think these are from like the Daily Mail's archive. they basically had like archive. They have probably had an archive of Beatles photos. I think majority of which I've never seen. Just looking for the Beatles on stage in Edinburgh and in Glasgow, I think. The Beatles with some of their Scottish fans, which is nice to see. So yeah, it's good to have that one. I've also got one for John, which I'll show when I do my Beatles and solo Beatles members books. Beatles Files from Andy Davis. This one's from Tim Hill and Murray Clayton. This one's from Andy Davis. I think this is again some of the unseen archives. Some like one from the Daily Mirror and some one from that was put on newspaper articles. See, it's a lot of cool stuff there. Beatles on stage. There's a nice picture of them with Roy Orbison, as it was Roy Orbison's birthday, and so they were celebrating his 20th birthday with Roy's wife, John and Ringo. Went to Soho with the party. Went to Soho with the part which where the party was. So yeah, there's this picture of the Beatles on television. Because the Beatles were a predominant feature on television in the 60s. They pretty much played a lot of TV shows in the UK as well as the US. They were because of how big it was. Picture of the Beatles in theatre. There's a lot of nice photos, and this one was 2001. And so there's the breakup of the Beatles article. One called Beatles, again from Igloo Books. This is just called Beatles. I'm not sure what this one is. I think it's sort of 2016 that one was, so it's a fairly recent. I think it's similar to the well, I think it's just different cover. So still nice to have. Here's one called The Beatles: A Private View. This Robert Freeman was one of the Beatles' many photographers, because the Beatles had different photographers, and so Robert Freeman was one of those ones that took photos of the Beatles. He did the With the Beatles cover. I like that front cover. I'm glad he chose that as the front. There's some nice photos that Robert took of the Beatles. There's a lot of nice ones. George Martin with a tuba in his head. There's John Paul. And there's pictures of the Beatles in the Bahamas when they were filming Help. Picture of Ringo. So it's a Hard Day's Night picture. So yes, nice to have. There we have. And when did that one come out? I can't seem to find. 1990. That one. Paperback, published 1993. Here's one called Treasures of the Beatles, which I'm sure Beatles fans have. No doubt. This has like Facsimile memorabilia included, which I'll show some. 2 posters. You get 2 posters, which I won't unfold, just whoosh. There. This was 2009. A handbill for the Beatles and Roy Orbison tour at the Gammon in Ipswich on Wednesday the 22nd of May 1963, and the times it's on, and the other acts who appear on the tour. The Beatles' contract for their time at Hamburg. Unfortunately, this is how the original one is. Sadly, this is how the original one is, missing like the rest of the contract. I don't know what happened, so how it turned out like that, but it did. You also get like, oh, some companies are falling out. Got like posters for the shows for the Milwaukee Auditorium, September 4th, 1964. A handcard of a Pan American plane, Boeing 707 airliner, signed by the Beatles. Their tour dates written on a piece of paper. Picture of the Beatles is Parlophone promo card and songs written down, which I think would be their set lists of time. Kind of all over the place. I'm just kind of looking through what. There's some posters for the Beatles shows. The Beatles at the Manila, Philippines Resolve Memorial Football Stadium, 4th of July 1966. That's a really cool one. Just picking out different examples. Beatles is a car for their Pacific Airways. A Japanese ticket for the Beatles, because they played 3 shows in Japan in '66. This is the other poster. It's nice to see John in a kilt there. So yeah, cool to have that one. It's a rather cool book. I've also got one on The Who as well. The Beatles Complete Recording Sessions by Mark Lewison. The treasure of the Beatles was Terry Burroughs from comic books. This is the Complete Beatles Recording Sessions by Mark Lewison. This is about all the Beatles sessions from 62 to 70. This came out on many occasions. First came out in 1988. This is the 2005 edition. Reprinted in 2013. I'm not sure, because many of my books are being reprinted. It talks about all the takes the Beatles did. Each day the days they spent in the studio, what they recorded, and when they released the recordings. Talks about the discography too, and then like memory and like the engineers and the producers and studio management as well. So it's a really good book. I recommend if you try and find that. Here's one called The Beatles, just called The Beatles. Well, quite a few of these books are just called The Beatles. It's about in 2000. This was originally 2010, but I think it's published 2013. It's like a lot of nice pictures. It's them in Hamburg. Beatles in the Cabin. So there's a lot of like cool photos and like information as well, so yeah, really good, really like. I have another copy of that. Someone gave me that one and one I got for Christmas. Two books from the BBC, The Beatles at the Beam, 1962 to 1965, the story of the radio career by Kevin Howlett. This is like the radio appearances for the BBC sessions from 62 to 65, which I really like this one. This came out in 1982. Oh, a long time ago then. It was a BBC canteen. So it's Paul, George, Ringo and John by a piano. That's then with the presenter Brian Matthew. With the radio presenter Brian Matthew. And it talks about the songs and when they played them and the timeline between the period. Here's one of from later on, 1996, Beatles the BBC Radio Years by Kevin Hallett again. I've got quite a few. I've got this Kevin Hallett, and let's talk about the radio appearances. Not like the BBC archives. The BBC archive one I think is a bit more updated, and so it's like, and here's a nice picture. There's a lot of cool pictures. And here's one called The Beatles by Igloo. This one is more recent. This is 2011, so this is a bit longer actually. This one's a bit longer than the other, than the one with the black cover. This has a lot more in their solo careers, a lot more photographs as well. Like after the Beatles, there's a lot more than after the Beatles as well. So to the end of that first pile, we're going to go over now to this last one of the first part. It's the complete Beatles Chronicle. Similar with the, this talks about what the Beatles did each day, with the performances between 1960 to 1957, 1970. As well as some pictures. This came out in, it was first published in paperback in 1995. Reprinted in 1996, so it talks about all the Beatles things they did, television, radio, concerts, and that. I've had this since my since the summer, but I forgot to show it. But it'll probably be my next vinyl update. I've got that book on the Who, and I really liked that one. I thought get the Beatles one as well. So that's the end of the first part. I'm going to see you in the second part.